Cada vez que compras un tipo de bebida alcohólica, ya sea vino, cerveza o licores, te vas a dar cuenta que el empaque tiene un gran impacto, no solo desde el punto de vista de cómo lo percibimos visualmente, sino de la calidad del líquido que está ahí contenido. El invitado de hoy, Austin Montgomery, se especializa en estudiar la interacción entre el empaque y las bebidas. Espero que disfruten esta conversación. Bienvenidos a The Food Engineer Podcast, un podcast dedicado a la exploración de alimentos y bebidas fermentadas. Yo soy tu anfitrión, Cristian Mercado. Welcome to a new episode of the Food Engineer Podcast. Today, we have with us Austin Montgomery. Austin, how are you?
Doing well. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for accepting this invitation.
Sure. Happy to be here.
Austin has a very interesting set of skills. I met Austin some time ago when we were both at Big Red Brewing, but I'm sure that he'll be able to talk more about that. To start, Austin, how do you end up working with beer, spirits, and everything in the alcohol world in a chemical manner?
Yeah, so I had an interesting experience in undergrad where one of my professors was from Slovakia, and he ran a course where over the summer, about 9 of us went to the wine regions of Slovakia, Czech Republic, and Hungary, and I kind of saw firsthand, we did a bunch of wine tastings, and I just tasting and talking about the science that makes Gewürztraminer different from Gruner Veltliner, from Riesling. Just kind of really opened my eyes to how cool wine was first. And then also just kind of going to college with craft beer just becoming as big as it is now. I really just fell in love with all things within flavor. I was a chemistry major and got lucky enough just to reach out to a faculty at Cornell that studies flavor chemistry, Gavin Sachs. And yeah, I mean, a lot of it was luck, but just probably being passionate about beer and wine initially, and just getting lucky enough to get a position in which I can study it further at a great place where there's so many other people that are also passionate about these kind of things.
So, what are you doing right now?
Right now, so I'm in my third year of my PhD. My project is very niche, I guess. It's any craft beverage that is in aluminum cans. I'm looking at things that cause off aroma formation and trying to identify markers within these beverages so that we can kind of assess what chemistry within those beverages are causing off aromas, and also kind of create remediation strategies to limit that bad aroma and increase the shelf life.
So we're talking about not only chemistry, flavor chemistry, but also there's some material science and interaction between the media, be it wine, beer, or anything else, an aluminum can, or at least its liner, right?
Yeah, so really an aluminum can is like a plastic bottle that's just very thin with the aluminum support. So when you're putting things that are really acidic in a can, it can eat through that liner. The liner doesn't really like to deal with ethanol that well. So things that are a lot higher ABV typically won't last as long in a can. And then, just if that beverage can interact with the aluminum, aluminum is a metal that's pretty reactive, and especially in the case of wine, can cause some pretty significant off aroma formation.
Talking about off aroma formation and perhaps off flavors in general for wine and alcoholic beverages, what are some of the most common off flavors that are associated with packaging?
So, wine is definitely the most obvious that you can detect an off aroma. All wine has a compound called SO2 in it, which protects against oxidation. It also stops from other kind of microbes creating more off aromas within wine. That's pretty much in all wine, except for organic wines typically won't have SO2 added. But that SO2 can get reduced by aluminum and form hydrogen sulfide or rotten egg aroma that is so potent that it really ruins a wine quickly. In terms of beer and other soft drinks that aren't so acidic or corrosive, you're more so worried about loss of flavors that uh, tend to like to exist in the polymer liner of the can rather than the water. So over time, um, if you have an IPA, for example, that has a lot of terpenes from the hops, those terpenes are going to be kind of seeped into that liner over time, and the beer is just either left flavorless or other compounds that aren't as attracted to that liner are then going to be able to express themselves better. So it's definitely kind of unpredictable, but there's a few different mechanisms of, I guess, off flavor.
You mentioned that the alcohol percentage or the ABV on a drink can have an effect as well as the acidity. So, does that mean that a higher ABV beer, say like a stout that is 12% alcohol, might be better off in a bottle than a can?
Sure, definitely. I don't have any data to back that up. I don't know if that experiment has been done explicitly, but you can think of a polymer as just this chain of kind of strings that's the basic polymer structure. And what ethanol can do is kind of go between those strings and kind of just make them open up so that pores in which things can, diffuse through them just get bigger and easier for those compounds to diffuse through. So I think anything that is age worthy, definitely put it in a bottle. It's just the safest option right now until we know more about kind of what chemistry is going on. It's not worth it to me to put something that for sure producer is going to put more effort into making an ageable sour or a big stout that's ageable. It's not worth it to put it in a can when the option for bottles there.
So, we've talked about off flavors that might be caused or that could be related to the packaging. But then there's good flavors or good tastes or good aromas that could come as part of the packaging. One of those is wood aging. And as we sit here at the food engineer's bar with two barrels on our side, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the effect that wood can have on aging alcoholic drinks.
Yeah, sure. It's definitely an interesting topic. I think as of recently too, there's been a lot of kind of new types of barrel aging with all kinds of different spirits. That's very exciting right now for you know all craft beverages.
Right. One of those really common flavors are oak or oak barrels. And we see types of oak like French oak, American oak, and then there's different levels of charring or burning inside those barrels to achieve a certain character. What happens to a beverage once it is put in a barrel or once it is put in contact with wood?
Yeah. So off the top of my head, I mean, there's definitely a few different things that are going on. One is just extraction of the flavor compounds that are in those oaks. That it's like you said, based on the charring. There's going to be different flavor compounds. Something that's charred more is maybe going to have more of a oaky charred flavor. Something that is not charred as much won't pick up as much of that oak character. Um, Also, flavor compounds are going to diffuse into that barrel as well. And it's definitely hard to predict uh, what exactly that's going to look like. I know that it's super variable by barrel too. What the end result is going to be that kind of makes it kind of fun as well. That kind of element of variability in all the different barrels. Also, I know that you're gonna lose some flavor compounds as depending on the humidity outside, you lose more water or more alcohol. So there's definitely it's a very complex system that I don't know can be easily modeled right now.
And perhaps that is part of the charm of it, right? As we have certain beverages that might age in for example, for Belgian beer, there's these giant foeders, which are just wooden fermenters that are reused over and over, sometimes for centuries. And across different barrels, we might have different behaviors, and that's where the art of blending comes in. So, if you were to be a blender, and I'm not saying that you are one, but what are things that you would consider between batches so that you can achieve what you might deem a good balance on, say, for example, a rum or a whiskey?
Yeah, it's definitely a really good question. I mean, if I could just copy kind of what someone like Jim Beam does, they're definitely taking in some of their more expensive blends. If it's not a single barrel, they're gonna take from a variety of aged barrels, because each barrel is gonna be it's gonna have a specific flavor. Maybe one is way more astringent, one is sweeter, one has way more cherries, cherry flavor that is, not actual cherries in there. But so I think you definitely want to look for distinctive barrels rather than something that's actually good. And then once you can find distinctive differences between barrels, then you can start to kind of create, I guess, a picture, if you will, in your head of what you can do with those different distinctive notes to create something new.
So, end of the day, you wound up with essentially a palette of gray colors, different tones of gray, or perhaps different colors, and you're essentially trying to paint a picture.
Yeah, I like that analogy. I think that's at least for the people that are good at their job, they can definitely do that, I think.
That's great. Tell me a little bit more about what is the difference, or what can be the difference between wood aging in beer and wood aging in something that is high proof, like
Hmm.
a liquor.
Okay. Yeah, I know that typically you're not going to use a new oak barrel for beer. If you want to make whiskey, if you can think like a really astringent, bourbon-y bourbon. I know that sounds weird, but it's oaky, dark bourbon. You want a newly charred barrel so that you can extract as much of those flavors as you can. Where beer, on the other hand, you don't typically see beers that want to be super oaky. It's more so it's a barrel that used to hold whiskey, so that those whiskey flavor compounds are in the barrel, and you can extract that into the beer. Maybe a better example would be like if you have a saison that you want to get kind of funky and weird, maybe the barrel held gin, so that you get some of those botanicals that was in the barrel that can then kind of be extracted into the beer. And it's also kind of like a sustainable program, if you will, where once something held a beverage, that barrel is going to retain some of that character that you can then use to add to the next thing that will be in the barrel. So definitely, it's you can get creative and create programs of continued aging to make various different products. Yeah.
I like that you touch on that, because that was going to be my next question. I've always been curious about the life of a barrel, and I feel that we can make a lot of good things with what comes out of Kentucky, with all those barrels that legally can only be used once. Um, I've been thinking for that for a long time, and in my opinion, there should be like an alternating set of beverages that one extracts and seeps something into the wood, and then the next one takes what the one previously had and puts it back in, like syrup and bourbon, or syrup, bourbon, beer, and go back to syrup.
Yeah, I wonder if anyone has ever kind of tried to think of like at what point does it just kind of reach equilibrium and you get like nothing, you know? I don't know if it would ever reach that point, but you got to think, you know, if you have unlimited time, you could just put something in there, not even necessarily to use it as a product, but just as a primer of, uh, you know, a specific note, if you will, to add to the next beverage there. Like, can you prime it to then add to, you know, can you put a bunch of sherry in a cask, not for the point of aging the sherry, but just to add to, you know, the whiskey that you would have put in it later. Maybe that's not as sustainable, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the possibilities will be, but it's definitely kind of a cool thing to play around with.
Certainly. A good example of that is what Ron del Barrilito does in Puerto Rico, where they have 3 or 4 different tiers of the rum, and their magic is how long they age it for in a barrel. But in an environment that is 80 degrees or 70 to 85 degrees in the year, it's a lot more humid than up in the States. You get a lot faster extraction, and I'm not the chemist here, but I'm gonna assume that with higher temperature, some reactions happen faster.
Sure.
And they bring all their wood from sherry, so they only use sherry casks. They age their rum in sherry casks for a certain amount of time, then they blend, and they end up with a delicious product. In fact, they have a barrel of rum that has been there since they opened. Wow. So it's really, really old. They say they're going to crack it open for free when Puerto Rico becomes a free country.
Wow, that's awesome.
So that's an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hopefully one day we'll have him here to explain to us exactly what they do.
Yeah, that would be cool.
As we talk about flavors, barrels, rum, and wood, I just poured you a glass of sorghum rum that I made.
Thank you.
And I guess this is the first, but we're just going to try this live here and try to describe it to people.
All right, sounds good to me.
While you make up your mind in terms of what you perceive, I'll explain a little bit about the process that this went through. This started out as sorghum syrup from a local farm in Groton, New York. And that syrup was diluted, was fermented. It was then distilled using a column still. And then I put it on a new oak barrel that was charred to the same level that you would char a barrel for whiskey. And that spent 3 months in there. And after 3 months, I put it on a crystal bottle. And that's what we got here.
Yeah, it's pretty tasty.
So it's kind of hard for folks to kind of appreciate rum if they've never been exposed to it. But I would say in terms of aroma, I get a pretty strong new wood aroma to it.
Yeah, it's definitely not necessarily in a bad way, just definitely overwhelmingly oak. Yeah.
Right.
Like it feels like you just walk into a room where they were just like
a sawmill.
Yeah.
Yeah. But also it has a tiny bit of like phenolic spice and
definitely kind of spicy, maybe like a little leathery, but also there's definitely an underlying sweetness that kind of makes it all kind of like bright as well.
Right. You're one of the first people to try this rum. So, what about taste?
I think it definitely has that kind of oaky astringency. That's certainly more astringent than most kind of commercial products. I would guess it has to be over 50%, or between 40 and 50.
It was put into the barrel at 60%.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty strong.
Yeah. So definitely, as alcohol is higher, you should be able to extract more of those oak tannins for sure, and I think that's probably what contributes to that astringency. But it's really nice. It's it's like very, it's hot. You can tell there's alcohol, but the sweetness is super nice, and it's pretty balanced. It's definitely at least a lot better than some commercial whiskeys that I've had. So
I'd like to add that Austin and I have been in plenty of tastings together, and we've had the experience of tasting everything from harsh stuff that I have made myself to really nice, smooth commercial stuff. We've had the pleasure of tasting each other's brews, so yeah, there's no hard feelings here.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say if I didn't like it, I would say it for sure.
Yeah, this is a nice nightcap.
Mm-hmm.
So, Austin, what is next for Austin Montgomery after his PhD?
Yeah, that's a good question. I really don't know. I mean, I'm gonna do an internship at a startup in Seattle called Atomo Coffee, and they basically roast the pits of dates that would get thrown out otherwise, like coffee, and add flavor compounds and caffeine, and try to make like a sustainable upcycled cold brew.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I think that I'll be working on projects related to the stability of flavors in an aluminum can for them. Um, so yeah, I don't really have any industry experience. I just really like thinking about flavors, aromas, how we can use science to make kind of an artistic picture, and understand how all of those interactions come together, whether that's industry or a postdoc, and try to do academia. I'm not sure, but for now I'm just kind of trying to learn as much as I can and do as many different things in this space to get a lot of different experiences.
To quote a very famous movie, we'll be watching your career with great interest.
Yeah. Yeah, well, thanks. It's yeah, it's so cool just to have the opportunity to come to a place like Ithaca and meet people like you and the other people within the department that have both different but also maybe like equally interests in these kind of things, because it's definitely, I'd say that any of our knowledge of this is a function of all the other people that we've met as well. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I guess I failed to mention that we went to school together for a bit.
Yeah, I guess for what, a year, I guess.
About a year,
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that you bring that up. There's a famous author that says that you are the average of the three people closest to you. So your personality and your behavior kind of gets influenced heavily by the people that you surround yourself with.
For sure. Yeah.
So I'm lucky that there's people like you around here that like all of these alcoholic beverages that I like to pursue as a career, but also as a hobby. And we get to have these deep discussions and even put them out there for other folks to learn a little bit about it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's the oak to the whiskey, I guess.
Austin, I've heard that you have a pretty interesting TikTok going on.
Yeah, it's more of just a casual, I'm gonna throw this out there kind of thing. Yeah, definitely got to put more effort into the videos. It turns out I couldn't imagine doing an actual podcast. Making like a 30-second video is enough work as is. But yeah, I just try to, anytime I try something that's interesting, try to review it and just kind of put my perspective out there, in hopes that other people can kind of think about beverages as like an artistic kind of expression rather than just this thing that you drink to get drunk.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting perspective, because something that I feel that plagues a lot of these industries is irresponsible consumption of alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see these as artistic expression, there's a certain moderation that comes with that, because you tend to slow down and try to savor the fruit of the labor of someone else.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think you put more thought into it. So you bring a really good point there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of tough because there's just a lot that goes into beer. Like, there's a lot of different beers, and there's a lot of different wines and distillates and everything, and it's kind of overwhelming, but it's definitely, I think, worth the kind of work on the front end to kind of learn what makes these things different, because then you can really appreciate it. But if you don't have an experience, or you're not lucky enough to meet other people that can say, hey, like, Gewürztraminer is cool because it has notes of lychee and spice, and that's from XYZ versus Riesling that tastes like diesel fuel for some reason, and that's because of this. You start, it at least like puts kind of these things in your head, and like, wow, that's kind of cool to think about it. And just so the more you kind of learn and gain experience, it's just more dimensions that your brain can kind of use to make an image in your head of what you're consuming.
It's true. Getting to have a soundboard or sounding board sort of group of people where you can essentially share what you think about a drink, or what do you think about a process, or what do you think how to do things, can definitely lead you to, one, question your own methods, but two, also learn from each other. And we constantly are bouncing back and forward ideas about brewing beers or aging them in a certain way. I know I have run a bunch of beers through you just to get your thoughts on it, to gain a different perspective. So with that, I just want to say, if you folks have a group of people that you can share a drink with, and a group of people that can help you become a better brewer, a better distiller, a better crafter of this study, if I may call it that way, I feel that that's something special, so you should just hold on to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if people want to get in contact with Austin Montgomery, where should they go to?
Oh, well, you can go to my website, montaustin.com. Yeah, it's just kind of, I guess, a virtual resume kind of thing, where it's just kind of says who I am. It has my most recent research talk. I recommend some beers and spirits on there, and I have a few blog articles, but I need to definitely keep up to date with those. But yeah, all my information's there, and I'm happy to hear anyone's perspective, or help anyone out if I can in this kind of flavor world.
That's awesome. So check it out, montaustin.com, Austin with an I. And yeah, thank you for coming here. We're just gonna take this time to enjoy the rest of this drink, but cheers.
Yeah,
thank you.
Cheers. Thanks a lot.
Este episodio fue producido y editado por Cristian Mercado. La música que escuchan se titula Razón de Vivir por Pedro Lavezarri. Pueden conseguir su música yendo a Bandcamp o siguiendo el link en las notas de este episodio.